You're sitting on a bus. It's 5 in the morning. You're crossing into Cambodia. Not because you want to go to Cambodia, but because your 90-day visa just ran out. Doing visa runs again? You've done this 3 times this year. You've spent hundreds of dollars on trips you never planned. And every time you come back, the clock resets. But here's the problem. This cycle never ends. There's a better way. Right now, over 160,000 foreigners from more than 110 countries are living legally in Vietnam. And almost none of them are doing visa runs. Not because they found a loophole, but because they're using long-term visa strategies that actually work. And if you want to live in Vietnam long-term, without visa runs, this is exactly what you need to understand. In this video, we'll break down the 4 real options people are using right now. First, a quick reality check. The 90-day e-visa is Vietnam's tourist visa. It was designed for short visits, not for long-term living. And this is where many people make a mistake. They try to turn a travel visa into a living strategy. Now, depending on your passport, you might get visa-free entry, usually around 45 days for some countries, and around 30 days for others in Asia. 90-day visa equals travel only, not for long-term living. But here's what most people don't realize. That still doesn't solve the problem. Because even if you combine visa-free entry with a 90-day visa, you're still stuck watching the calendar, planning your next exit, and eventually doing visa runs again. If you actually want to live in Vietnam, sign a lease, open a bank account, get health insurance, and stop thinking about your visa every few weeks, you need a different approach. The good news? Those options already exist, and in 2026, they're clearer and more structured than ever. So let's go through the real ways people are doing it, starting with the one most long-term expats rely on. This is the most common, most stable, and honestly, the most underrated option for living in Vietnam long-term. A work permit paired with a temporary residence card, or TRC, gives you legal residency tied to employment. It's valid for 1 to 3 years at a time, and it renews from inside the country. No border runs, no 90-day countdown, just a normal legal life. There are 3 routes to qualify. The first, you get a job offer from a Vietnamese organization before you arrive. You process the paperwork at the Vietnamese consulate in your home country and land here already sorted. The second, a company in Vietnam sponsors you after you arrive. This can be full-time work, a part-time consulting contract, or even remote work, as long as the employer is a registered Vietnamese entity and they file the paperwork on your behalf. The third one surprises a lot of people. You register your own Vietnamese company, and that company employs you. We'll get into that more in option 2. So what jobs do people actually use for this? Well, teaching English is the most common entry point. A TEFL certification gets you there, but honestly, that's just the beginning. People also work in corporate training, university lecturing, IT consulting, marketing, manufacturing advisory, and sales. Vietnam's economy is growing faster than almost anywhere else in Southeast Asia, and Vietnamese companies are hiring. They really do hire foreigners. And here's something people often don't realize. You don't need to work full-time. Even 10 to 15 hours a week of legitimate contracted work can qualify you for a work permit. Some expats here teach 2 mornings a week and spend the rest of their time exactly how they please. Setup costs for the work permit typically run between $500 and $1,500, and in many cases, the employer covers it entirely. The temporary residence card itself costs between $150 and $300, depending on the length of stay. With a TRC, you can open a Vietnamese bank account, sign long-term leases in your own name, access domestic health insurance, and get utilities connected directly to your address. You stop being a tourist passing through. You start actually living here. But what if you don't want a job at all? That's where the next option comes in, and it's the one most semi-retired expats quietly use. This is the pathway for people who want full control, but don't want to answer to an employer. You register a Vietnamese company, invest capital into it, and that company sponsors your visa. The result: a DT investor visa, followed by a temporary residence card. This is how a large number of semi-retired expats in Vietnam actually live. They're not clocking in 9 to 5. They own something. They might work 10 hours a week. They're overseeing, consulting, managing, and living the rest of the time. So, what kind of businesses do people actually open? Well, most are not tech startups. In reality, most are pretty straightforward service businesses. Things like consulting firms, marketing agencies, language training companies, photography businesses, tour operators, cafes, bars, and restaurants. If you've ever thought about opening a small place on the beach in Hoi An, this is, honestly, the legitimate legal pathway to do exactly that. There are 4 tiers in the DT class, DT1 through DT4, and they're based on the amount of capital you invest and the nature of your business activity. For most people considering this option, you'd probably qualify under DT3 or DT4, which can give you 1 to 3 years of residency, and these are renewable and convertible to a temporary residence card. Now here's the honest part, this is not a cheap option. The current capital requirements for a small legitimate business sit somewhere between $28,000 and $40,000 at the lower end, and for certain business types, they're trending toward $100,000. That number has gone up a lot since 2020, and honestly, it will probably keep changing. But here's the key difference. Unlike some other countries where you just park your money in a government account and it sits there, Vietnam's capital requirement actually gets spent. It goes into your rent, your staff salaries, equipment, and day-to-day operations. It's real foreign investment into the Vietnamese economy, and that's why it's allowed. But this option is not for everyone. It's designed that way on purpose. Vietnam is looking for people who are going to contribute economically, not just folks who want a visa with minimal commitment. One really important note: all the fees, capital thresholds, and requirements in this category change regularly. So anyone quoting you numbers from 2019 or even 2022 might be giving you outdated info. Always verify the current requirements with a licensed Vietnamese visa consultant before you make any financial decisions. If you were born in Vietnam, have Vietnamese parents, or can show Vietnamese ancestry, you probably qualify as an overseas Vietnamese, which is known locally as Viet Kieu, and the benefits here are actually pretty meaningful. We're talking multi-year visa exemptions, simplified residency applications, faster renewals, and honestly, just less bureaucratic friction overall. Vietnam has made it pretty clear they want to welcome back their diaspora, and that policy direction has only gotten stronger in recent years. But there's an important detail that catches a lot of people off guard. Even with Viet Kieu status, many visa classes still require you to exit Vietnam every 180 days, kind of like how Thailand's 5-year digital nomad visa works, where you still have to leave the country every so often, even though the visa itself is multi-year. The exact rules will depend on the specific visa class you get. So, if this pathway applies to you, really, do not try to handle it yourself. Always consult a licensed Vietnamese immigration attorney or a registered visa agent. Getting the documentation right the first time can save you months of headaches and complications later on. Like almost every country in the world, Vietnam allows foreign nationals to live here long-term as enrolled students. And honestly, this pathway is far more practical and affordable than most people realize. You can enroll in Vietnamese language programs, university degree programs, cultural studies, or even academic research programs. These are real enrollment options through accredited institutions, not loopholes or gray area workarounds. This option works especially well for people who genuinely want to integrate, to learn the language, build real local networks, and actually understand how Vietnam works from the inside out. It's also, one of the most effective bridge visas available. Many long-term expats started on a student visa, then transitioned into a work permit or business visa once they had established themselves on the ground. So, what does it actually cost? A Vietnamese language program typically runs between $1,000 and $2,500 per year. Visa processing and extensions add another $300 to $500. So you're looking at roughly $1,500 to $3,000 all in for a full year of legal long-term residency in Vietnam. For context, that's significantly less than 3 or 4 border runs a year when you factor in transport accommodation and lost time. Plus, learning even basic Vietnamese changes your experience here in ways that are honestly hard to overstate. Expats who speak the language get access to a completely different Vietnam than those who don't. Better prices, deeper relationships, more trust from locals, and just a much richer daily life. One thing to be clear about though, this option requires you to actually show up. Vietnam's immigration authorities do verify enrollment. If you're not genuinely attending, it's not the right path. Now, before we get into the final piece, there's something you need to understand about where Vietnam's visa system is heading. Here's something most travelers don't realize. Vietnam's visa system is still evolving. Over the past few years, there have been multiple updates reported by local news and business sources. The direction is becoming clearer. Vietnam is slowly moving away from short-term tourist stays as a long-term solution, and shifting toward more structured, long-term residency options. In simple terms, authorities want people who live in Vietnam long-term to be on the right type of visa, work, study, invest, or have a clear legal reason to stay. This is why visa runs are getting more attention, and why relying on them long-term is becoming less predictable. Now, you may have seen discussions online about new visa categories or future programs. But here's the important part. Most of those are not officially confirmed yet, so it's risky to plan your life around something that doesn't exist today. Instead, focus on what is already available and working, because the trend is clear. More structure, more compliance, and more stability for those who follow the right path. So for now, use what works today, and keep an eye on updates as they happen. This is definitely something to watch closely. Here's something most people don't expect. Almost no long-term expat arrives in Vietnam on their final visa. What usually happens is a step-by-step transition. They start simple, then adjust as their situation becomes clearer. A very common pathway looks like this. Tourist visa first, then switch to a student visa, then move into a work permit, and eventually some choose the investor route. This approach gives you flexibility. You don't need to figure everything out on day one. You learn the system as you go. And this is very important. This is not unique to Vietnam. It's how immigration systems work almost everywhere. You enter short-term, then transition into something more stable. So instead of chasing visa runs, focus on your next step. Because long-term living is not one decision, it's a process. Before we wrap up, 2 mistakes that catch people off guard. The first is using outdated information. Visa rules, capital thresholds, and processing fees in Vietnam change regularly, sometimes annually. A video or blog post from 2021 or 2022 may quote costs and requirements that are completely different from what applies today. Always verify with a current source before making any decisions. The second is trying to handle all of this alone. Vietnam's visa system involves Vietnamese language paperwork, specific government departments, and precise documentation requirements. The cost of hiring a licensed local visa agent is small. The cost of getting it wrong is not. Work with a professional. It is genuinely worth it. So here's the reality. Living in Vietnam long-term without visa runs is absolutely possible. But it only works if you're using the right strategy. A work permit and TRC, if you want stability. An investor visa, if you want control. The Viet Kieu pathway, if you have Vietnamese roots. And a student visa, if you need a flexible starting point. Everything else? It's temporary. Or it gets risky over time. The people who live here long-term aren't doing visa runs every few months. They've moved past that stage. They've built something more stable. And that's the real shift. From visiting to actually living here. If you're planning to stay in Vietnam long-term, the question isn't when is my next visa run? It's what's my next step? If you're not sure which option fits your situation, drop your country and your plan in the comments. I'll help you figure it out. And if this video saved you from another visa run, you already know what to do.